Hi, welcome to Wide Awake News Radio. I am your host, Charlie McGrath. I'm the founder of WideAwakeNews.com. I'm the founder of Wide Awake News Radio, heard exclusively here on the one and only Rinse Radio Network. Eric Lovely, as I announced last Thursday, would be joining me here. Right now, we're experiencing a little bit of a reboot problem with his system there in the undisclosed location in the deep dark cave in Colorado. So we're trying to get him added to the conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to here in just a few minutes. I want to, first of all, if you were looking for Gabe's program on my YouTube channel, he had a little bit of technical issues here, so I need to do a little bit of editing to that, and hopefully I will have that up and ready this evening after the program here tonight, and after Doug Owen and I goof around for an hour or so recording Doomcast, which we'll be doing after the program here tonight. I'm going to try Eric again right now and see if we have any more luck getting him on here. I know he had a lot of insight that he wanted to talk about with Ukraine. Eric, you with me?
Yes, Charlie, I'm here.
Well, I'm surprised. I thought I'd get a little notification when you came back online, and I never did, so I'm surprised. Eric, I was just explaining that we had a little technical issue with your deep, dark cave in the undisclosed Colorado location. I'm glad you got it fixed because you were throwing things at me. I'm sitting in my office, and you're throwing things at me in Skype. Check out this Max Kaiser 691 about the Russian currency crisis and another things you're pumping at me. So I know you have a lot of stuff you want to cover tonight. So I'm glad you could make it. Now, one thing that you pushed at me was about Bitcoin. And I wanted to start off with that because I'm a little bit in the dark on this, other than, Microsoft is now accepting Bitcoin for purchases and, it's gaining more traction. It certainly has fallen a whole bunch from its high, which was what, $700 or $800 per Bitcoin down to, I don't know.
1129.
1129 was a high?
Yeah.
And what's it running at today? $300?
340, 330, something like that.
Yeah. So welcome to the program. What did you want to talk about on Bitcoin? Because I want to get that out of the way because I know I want to talk about this Russian thing. Go ahead.
I guess to kind of get it all smushed in, so if people don't know who Peter Schiff is, he put out his podcast, blogcast. I'm not sure what you want to call it. He's actually getting syndicated and moving on to some radio stations. But if you go and you pick up you can go to YouTube and you can listen to it today, where basically he'll tell you how to try to not suffer so poorly from your losses in the Bitcoin arena. For me, it was a big thing. A lot of people were arguing. It was something that we had talked about in some meetings and things where people talked about Bitcoin and, the salvation of wealth in the hands of the people. Everyone attempting to figure out some way to generate wealth or the longevity of your wealth, holding on to your wealth, being free to own wealth. And a lot of people, a lot of vultures came out and they sold Bitcoin really heavily. And they talked about how it was, it was the new gold, and overnight it was going to fix the world's problems, and people were going to rush into it, and eventually it was going to overcome the banks and so forth. And basically I told everyone, well, it's going to be modernized, it's going to be mainstreamed, and it's going to be manipulated. The 3 M's. And what modernized, mainstream, manipulated means is basically the banks are going to move in, big corporations are going to figure out how they're going to make money from it, how they can control it, because it is not gold, it is not a static value. It is not something that has intrinsic value that you mine out of the ground that takes physical sweat labor. And, everybody's crying and whining about Bitcoin this year. And, some of the proprietors and some of the proponents of Bitcoin who sold it on this big hype about all these big millions that you were going to make and whatnot, really were just, peddling sales. And so the only thing I can say to the people who have been talking to me about Bitcoin and the massive losses in Bitcoin, to those individuals, check out the Peter Schiff video. He tells you how to eliminate that problem that you're going to have with the IRS by using those Bitcoins. And one of the biggest things he talks about too is monetizing your own debt through the IRS, by doing a loss gain swap. I don't know if you're familiar with how those work, but you will buy out your like gold and silver using Bitcoin, and then you register a loss with the federal government, which will actually, the loss, depending on where you purchased and where you sold your Bitcoin at, would be a taxable loss. And then that would cover gains that you could make in gold or in, let's say, stocks, if you had stocks. So you could balance those things back and forth. People should check that video out and have a listen to what he has to say. You know, I'm sorry to the Bitcoin people. Maybe they should have listened to those of us who said it's not gold, it can't be gold, it lacks, 5 to 7, depending on who you talk to, fundamental working tools to be gold or to take the place of gold. And one of the big ones is a 6,000-year track record. That maybe in the future there could be a perfect world where digital currency works, but at the moment, no, it's more of a pyramid scheme.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you and I have talked about it in the past, and I've talked about it with Doug. And obviously, we're not experts on Bitcoin or how you're mining these Bitcoins or how they're created, who controls them. And the notion that this is 100% completely electronic scares the hell out of me, Eric Lovely, as far as the ability to manipulate. I mean, it seems that it would be something that would be even more manipulable than paper assets, derivatives on gold and silver. And I know a lot of people that got into Bitcoin when they were super cheap and they made a pile of money. But as far as trusting it as the future of currency, I'm dubious. I have dubious thoughts on that at best.
Oh, absolutely. And, to the other individuals who got into Bitcoin when they were 5, 6, 10, 12, 30, 50, $100, and you bought your Bitcoin pieces and you can now sell at a profit, that nearly 300% profit. I mean, that for those people, I mean, bravo. You're still playing the risk right now that the market is still highly volatile. You may lose another 100, you may gain 100. The biggest thing that I'm pointing towards, Peter Schiff, for the people who bought into Bitcoin at 900, 1,000, and you're looking at the tax season ending, you're looking at the end of the year. Well, for you to take those different tax breaks and to understand what's going on, you have to make the purchases before the end of the year, before January 1st. So people may want to check that out, maybe help them recover some of their losses or recoup their losses through a tax loop.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, and Peter Schiff, being Peter Schiff, I mean, obviously, he's a huge proponent of precious metals. So I'm assuming, I haven't watched a video, but I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. He actually has a service that, he talks about providing the service through him and through others. I was promoting the video on how it's done, where you want to buy your gold. Nobody pays me or consults with me on which brokerage houses in that manner, for this program. So, people can choose their own, whether they want to use Peter Schiff's or whether one of our sponsors has the same availability for you to liquidate your Bitcoin losses and turn it into precious metals. And actually get a tax return. That's basically what's going on. Peter Schiff shows you how to take those losses and turn them into a tax return at the end of the year, plus come out with gold and silver, precious metals in your hand now. So, I mean, that's just an angle for people, because I feel bad. Everyone really, really thought that it was we're so uppity, we're so intellectual now, we're so automated in technology, and the realization of why currencies work is because they're a real thing, because an actual, even to a fiat system, there is some type of stabilization simply by producing a paper note that says it exists.
Right.
That is the reason why people need to pay attention, because they're using the Bitcoin revelation, the losses, and blah, 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 to push. Once again, you now have a Harvard economist coming out saying that the biggest hindrance to the Federal Reserve to fix all of our woes and make the world a utopia is the realization of a tangible dollar. In other words, he gave a huge speech at Harvard about going completely cashless into an all-digital currency on chips planted into your body.
Oh, that's handy.
At Harvard. I mean, these words came from Harvard.
That's right out of Revelations.
Pretty much, I mean, or if you don't believe in the biblical version, you can look at 1984 or many other, fictional authors have written about these things. You look at Transcendence, you look at any number of variant movies now coming out that are all touching on this subject, as well as certain things that were sidelined. And that's another amusing thing too, because as you look at the propaganda, it is really getting interesting in this country what they're professing, what they're preaching, and where they're attacking. Right now, everybody, I'll tell you, looking at the second half of Max Kaiser's video and doing a couple minutes research, a lot of people should be out there defending porn. But hey,
yeah, I had enough time to watch the first 15 minutes of it, but then it strolled into the second half. And for those of you want to see it, it's the Kaiser Report 691. I think that's his latest, isn't it?
Yes, that'd be the episode in question that we're talking about. And, I think one of the big things is the second half, I didn't think I would really get a whole lot of it. But when they started talking about the bills, and you clearly go and you research the bills that are attacking the porn industry, it doesn't say porn. It says multi-streaming media. So that means what you do, what I do, if they can beat the porn industry and convince everyone that these moves of legislation is about porn, they will basically cripple the alternative media and cripple the internet as it exists, because they are deeming themselves and propagating forward because of porn that they need to monitor, censor, and control the internet. It's another attack on the basically freedom of information. Yeah,
no doubt, and it's been, this isn't anything new. It's kind of like going after Assad in Syria. They're going to keep beating the drum until they topple Assad, until they get the air intervention or the ground troops in Syria. And they've been, it's the same thing with the internet. It's been under constant attack, especially the last half decade or so, and it seems to come close. And then small victories will be gained, only to have the next election cycle or the next Congress come in and decide that they need to go after it once again. The same thing with gun control. We get these small victories, but it certainly isn't the war. They keep coming back over and over again on these issues, and sometimes they do it in the guise of executive orders. Sometimes it's things like this $1.1 trillion spending bill to keep the government running, where you find out inside here there's all kinds of sweet perks for Wall Street, things that they've been trying to undo from Dodd-Frank that are not popular. But this is how we govern. It's certainly one thing in front of the cameras. If it doesn't work, they dress it up in a different light, and then try to do away with or add to, in some cases, with the next go around. The next cycle, the next news cycle, in some cases.
Well, a chieftain, but yet a simple man. My grandfather, a long time ago, he used to always make this phrase, and I used to laugh at it just because, it had a dirty word in it, and I was really young and so forth. They always used to, every time there was politicians or anything, he'd say, used car salesman. And I'd look at him and he'd say, brand new paint job on the same old shit heap. And, he would this was one of his mantras, and he was so profoundly correct that it is astonishing that, it didn't sink into my life earlier. The same problems. You see, government creates problems. There is no way for anyone to say that government doesn't create problems. That's what it does. That's all it does. You now look at, as another huge story that really will cover probably a large amount of time for us, is the Russian endeavor.
Yeah.
The sanctions, everything we're doing to Russia is backfiring. Everything is failing. And, I made the critical alarm we've been talking about. I've even felt from you that these problems with Russia were very critical for us, and that things are going to go extremely poorly, and they can. The pieces continue to move around the board with the nuclear investigators in Iran. Iran said, sure, fine, come on in. Then they changed the site of orientation. like, I don't know, half a dozen times. The Iranians continued to agree. Now they picked a completely different portion of the country to go to, said they didn't want to go to all that, or the original places that the Iranians said they could go to. So you have the Russian endeavor, but what really is the spot they want to look at is where the Russians are working with the Iranians on some nuclear power testing. You have, most people don't understand. Yes, the Russian economy, the crash in their economic dollar, for the lack of a better word, it's called a ruble. But in the reality, they are so much stronger than what we realize. It really is amazing when you start to lay out some of the facts of things. And I know that you had continued to engage me and talk about Russia. Well, what were the nuts and bolts and some of the things that were going on with Russia, right, which is the reason why I thought I would provide you with the video so that you get a little background and maybe we can talk about some of them.
Yeah, and you know, most of the things that you're talking about, that same video with Max Kaiser when he's talking about the 40% fall in the value of the ruble. Now, you know, when that happens to our currency, you know, we hear these folks on CNBC and the other business media outlets talking about how great that is for our economy. You know, our dollar is becoming weaker. That means that it's cheaper for other countries to buy our goods, and we can export more. And how a strong dollar is actually negative for our economy. Well, obviously, a 40% reduction in the value of the ruble over the last since, you know, the beginning of these sanctions, it's a shock, and it's being played by the West and the media in the West as a glorious victory because of sanctions. But you're 100% right. And it's, you know, I've talked about this for the last couple of weeks, that at the end of the day, the Russians don't care. They don't care because they're still the number one gas producer on this planet, and they have customers lining up for their product. And to think that any kind of economic jab that we give to Russia, or any kind of economic stiletto we shove into their ribs, isn't going to come back and hurt the West is just being disingenuous with ourselves. I mean, Russia provides 30% of the energy for Western Europe. And if they decide that instead of going to Western Europe, they're going to build pipelines down into China, then guess what? It's going to affect the Western economies in Western Europe, which is going to affect the United States. And Max does a great job of explaining how the devaluation of the ruble is hand in hand with the devaluation in oil. And it's basically a wash for Russia, because they have this massive amount of reserves, over almost 2 years worth of foreign currency in their banks to pay their debts. They're not facing any kind of economic implosion because of the actions of the West. And the West is sitting here laughing like somehow we've created some kind of carnage inside of Russia. But the truth is, they have the reserves. They have the cash reserves. They have the energy. They have the customers. And you know what? They're not extended all over this planet, fighting wars all over this planet. Go ahead.
We need to go even deeper. See, the realization for people to truly understand why we're losing this fight and losing it badly, no matter what the propaganda on the TV says, is you need to get past you can look at some big things, but you can get down to the nuts and bolts. One, yes, you gave two major nuts and bolts, which are the 1.76 years worth of foreign currencies to cover every single debt, every single foreign interaction that they need be for that long. They have that capital already sitting there in reserve. Then we could talk about industrial. If you look that, yes, we're talking about their exchange with other nations has dropped and the ruble has dropped 40%. But if you look at it, their natural spending, or what they call domestic spending, which is, say, you going down and buying something from another American, has now spiked. So the people are still spending the same amount of money. And their economy is recovering by continuing to expand in their private market, or they're increasing their what they call status in life, or your way of life, or bettering your environment and the way you live life, getting better toys, better trinkets.
Yeah, now, their standard of living is increasing.
But the reason why this is possible is because when they broke away and they became a free nation, they literally actually gave the land to the people and the people actually have real land that they own physically themselves. So there is actually less than 20% of the land in the entire nation in mortgage. In other words, it's owned outright.
Yeah.
The average liquidatable income for a Russian is 60% of their income. And now imagine being able to literally spend 60% of your income no matter where you work, and it was basically all for toys, entertainment. In other words, after your food, your bills, and everything is done, that is about 40% of your income. On the margin scales, we'll pick it up, I guess, after this.
Yeah, it's a very good point. That 60%. We'll compare that to what we're looking at here in the U.S. And in the West for disposable income. We'll be back with Eric Lovely and more Wide Awake News Radio. Hang tight. All right, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath joined with Eric Lovely on this 11th day of December, Wednesday, and I want to tell everybody to please keep listening tonight to the rest of the broadcast here on the one and only Rinse Radio Network. We'll be back here on Tuesday with our good man Gary Hendershot hosting the program. I'll be on here Wednesday, and Eric and I will be on here again next Thursday. We were talking about the economic situation inside of Russia. How our media, at least the people that are actually paying attention to it, a lot of people are caught up with this ridiculous holiday season, trying to run up more debt on their credit card and maybe expand the credit limit a little bit as we see personal credit card debt continue to rise, and not paying attention to what's going on. But if you are, there's this big coup, these economic sanctions against Russia and the devaluation of the ruble by 40%. As I said before, when you look at the fact that oil has also fallen 40%, and that Russia isn't sweating this. Eric was speaking a little bit to the fact that when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of the state-owned land was in effect given to the people of Russia, and now the average Russian has 60% disposable income. And as you pointed out, Eric, I mean, if Americans had that kind of disposable income, you wouldn't see $1 trillion in credit card debt. You wouldn't see over $1 trillion in student loan debt. If we had the disposable income that the people in Russia have, we would truly be going out and consuming more and not running up debt in order to do it. And I think that's an important factor to hone in on for a minute.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's take it a step further. Let's take the absolute worst in Russia. Okay. The absolute worst idea. Imagine you're a McDonald's employee. Now, for the averages of the McDonald's employee within Russia is that you, on your income working 40 hours a week, you will have 31% expendable income. Now, who in their right mind can work at McDonald's in America and have any expendable income? You have to work 60, 70 hours in the fast food industry to even be able to support your bills.
Yeah.
I mean, you
don't have to pick McDonald's. I mean, you can make, I don't care if you're making $50,000-$60,000 a year. You don't have 60% disposable income once the mortgage is paid and the car is paid and your insurance is paid and you're buying food. You just don't have that much money left over.
Yeah, it just simply doesn't exist. So
I mean, the majority of the people in the country are waiting for the next check so they can write it out in bills. And then when that's gone, they're lucky to have, 5% left over if they could save anything.
Yeah, I mean, savings is almost a foreign issue. And, if you want to talk about how bad – people don't understand that it's the positioning of pieces like a chessboard. So they need to translate things more in that fashion. If you first look at the maneuver that was made, the reason why Russia is in the driver's seat and we are hurt and we're in real bad shape, you have to look at the different economic structures. One, Russia is one of the leading producers of oil and energy. Okay, and you need to look at the maneuver they made where they entered into the BRICS agreement to create a new currency. They really don't care about the ruble, and that's what people need to understand because they're working towards a commodity-based, gold exchange-backed currency. Okay, that's what they're working towards. So they made an agreement with very specific nations. So India is one of the biggest powerhouses that's included in this nation, and I told people that they were no longer going to be our ally in this fashion, that they were going to move towards a different type of nation nation alliance because they believe in precious metal. It is ingrained into their natural being. Most of the religions, everything, gold, silver, gold, silver. I mean, it's repeatedly. If you know anything about India's culture, if you go back in time, you'll know gold and silver is the cornerstones. Well, now you take other precious commodities. So you have a 10-year, another 10-year with an optional 30-year, which basically it's the first 10 years is guaranteed, 20 years optional to extend, oil contracts between China, India, and Russia that just formulated. So now you have this huge energy cycle being concentrated within the BRICS nations that made this gold-backed agreement. Then you have on top of that, Russia is the number one producer of diamonds in the world. It does not matter. Okay, you have rough-cut diamonds. These things were generally produced all throughout Europe, all throughout your European nations, Sweden, down through into some of the closer to India. You get to some of the closer nations down there, but that's where all of the cut diamonds came from. Russia has now since signed an agreement and is canceling all of those deals and moving their entire diamond trade to India. So India will now be the producer of all of the Russian, the number one diamond producer in the world for fine cut diamonds. So these things are now, they're moving it out of the dollar. They're physically moving the diamond trade out of the dollar and into the realm of the BRICS nations where what's going to take place, a gold-backed currency. So you see these commodities are being transferred. Now you look at the nuclear agreement that was signed with India to create 12 new nuclear plants, which actually gives Russia access to cake uranium found in Indian-controlled territories. Now, people need to truly look at the pieces and understand what's going on here. What does America have left to the United States and the Pentagon have left to fight with other than actual bullets, actual bombs, and actual blood and guts? I mean, the reality are the pieces are on the table, and we're losing badly, and we're losing rapidly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're talking about physical assets, I mean, the argument can be made that the technology is still on the side of the West, but I don't know how. I mean, I don't know how deep that argument could be made. I mean, Russia is, arguably they're making as advanced equipment as far as avionics and as far as what they do with their technology as the West. But at the end of the day, we have a military to export and a dollar to export. And when those two go, when one of those go, the other one's going right along with it.
Well, and that's the big thing. We're functioning off of these things because we export them. Well, an export is an agreement between two parties. If there's no one at the window to take delivery, well, what are you exporting and who you're exporting to? Once the model finally decays to that point, if you look at the inflation in food, if you look at the huge, they're cutting their own throat by driving the gas prices down to attempt to beat Russia. It just isn't going to work. If you look at what China has staged the other side of the coin for this new currency, this new world order. What have they been doing with their Federal Reserve dollars? Instead of stacking energy, they stacked what they could stack. Precious commodities like copper, iron, coal, anything that you build something out of, anything that you can create something out of. The Chinese have just been stacking it and stacking it and stacking it. That's how they're preparing for this onslaught. And the only thing the U.S. knows how to do is to be a fascist dictator. That is the only thing they know how to do. And it's failing because the world and certain nations in the world have chosen to go a different direction. Now, I'm not saying that those nations are better than other nations, that they're freer than other nations. They've just prepared differently because they want to be on top of the steaming pile of dog shit when this all settles.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm jumping back here a little bit to that 60% disposable income by Russia, and I just went to national or USDebtClock.org because I wanted to see what the average debt per family is now. Looking at U.S. total debt of 59, and this is using government numbers: 59 trillion, 482 billion, 829 million, and that is tantamount to 729,000 per family in the United States, and the total savings per family average in the United States is $8,700. So, I mean, each family in the country has been straddled with nearly $750,000 in debt, and the average family can save about $8,700. I mean, so to think that we're somehow on a solid financial foundation, and we are somehow hurting Russia by convincing NATO countries to impose this sanction against Russia, it doesn't pan out. We have nothing as a nation. We have nothing but a military, a dollar, and debt. We'll be back with more Wide Awake News Radio. Eric Lovely. I want to talk a little bit about Eastern Europe and how that is being played out as well. Talking about Poland, Ukraine, our troops, our equipment heading that way, and the potential for World War III. We'll be right back next Thursday. Maybe we'll do the Christmas edition with Eric Lovely. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Final segment on this 11th day of December. Eric and I, during the break, we're talking a little bit about Christmas and how it has been completely pimped out into something that is a corporate, dream. And maybe next week, Eric, we can devote the hour to that and really tick some people off.
Yeah. Maybe we'll sing some hymnals to Santa Claus.
I want to get into a little bit about. I mean, I read this headline to you during the break, the first break. U.S. Army plans to send Abrams tanks and Bradleys to Eastern Europe. More military exercises between NATO countries and would-be NATO countries on the border of Russia. The Ukrainian economy is absolutely devastated. They are now basically nothing more than prostitutes for NATO, for the IMF, and that's the game plan. I mean, that is what they've done throughout Europe. They've went in and made these nations give up their sovereignty, implement austerity onto the people of those countries, lend them bunches and bunches of money in order to pay it back to banksters and go in and sap the natural resources of the nations while they're taking their gold. And we see it in Ukraine right now. I mean, their currency is absolutely falling off the cliff. They need the IMF to come in there or it's game over. And it's going to come with a heavy price tag, which is, you're going to be just another place where we can have a military presence, Eric.
Yeah, but there's so much wrong. I mean, people have to realize that, yes, that is the ultimate line. Now, here's what people need to actually comprehend about Ukraine, is that all the stuff that the IMF is going to demand for payment exists in the east and southeast portions of Ukraine who are rebelling.
Right.
So, therefore, the war will continue. There will be more death, more killing, more everything. And that's basically what the loan will be based upon. People need to realize that this strategic maneuver to block Russia having a seaport and an accessible manufacturing base. If anybody knows anything about Ukraine or should study up on their abilities in manufacturing, basically they did that to hurt Russia, but Russia is really winning in the end. It's not going to come to any type of closure. The markets, businesses, companies, everything within Ukraine that was worth anything has fled. Most people don't even want to talk about the lowly hidden story, how 70% of the Ukrainian president's assets have been removed from Ukraine and placed abroad. So that because he's losing, he knew as a rich man, he knew how bad the situation was, and no one wants to talk about these criminal rights violations. The big thing that people need to understand is as Ukraine falls apart, as the CIA documentation comes out, you're having massive protests across all of the EU that no one's wanting to talk about. And some of these nations are now begging for a stronger presence by the almighty United States military. So you have these tensions are rising. The EU is imploding if people don't really realize. The only reason why the EU still stands is because Germany is big, it's powerful, it has an economic basis, and they're still on the side of the bankers. They're still working for the United States, because we promised Germany that they would take over Europe many, many years ago. People don't really want to realize that, but that's where you're looking at. So this situation is going to implode. The jets that are moving into Libya as part of the agreement, people are overlooking the Libyan story. Well, they're attempting to put in fast, long-range bombers into northern Libya and areas around there to respond to southern Russian territories. southern Russian troops. I mean, you're basically looking at pieces continuing to move towards World War III because, as we've talked about many times before, Charlie, the currency wars proceed. Debt, destruction, debt, terrorism, they normally precede the currency wars, and the currency wars normally precede the hot wars. And, we're looking at a possible World War event, as we've been talking about for months now.
Yeah, well, it seems to be steadily marching in that direction. I mean, and it's hard. I mean, you know what? You're not going to hear that from, the story I quoted to you, U.S. Army plans to send Abrams tanks and Bradleys. What percentage of our people know that? What percentage of the people in this country are being exposed to that? I mean, that's literally, I had to go to the military.com to see that story. It's just, it's not being talked about. What we're hearing is banker rule. That's the only way. Continued growth, and the sanctions and the debt and the austerity is all not. This isn't by Obama or by Merkel or by these other leaders. This is all strategy designed by central bankers in order to expand their influence eastward. And I'm with you. I don't like we said it. You said it earlier in the program that you're not necessarily apologists for Russia, but I really do believe that there's absolutely no way that they are going to allow this expansion to their border. And that's why you're hearing all this talk of this move. It puts us even closer to another Cold War. But we're past all that, right? We don't have the luxury of looking at several decades of Cold War. Resources are tight. The economies of the world are changing. The powers that be are not going to be the powers of the future. And Eric, I don't see, and maybe you can give me your perspective on this, I don't see this turning into another 50 years of Cold War. I see this turning to a point where, yes, you're going to have outright movement by Russia into Ukraine, into some of these other Eastern European countries that border them, and you're going to have a NATO-backed and in some cases NATO member nations that will engage in actual combat on the plains of Eastern Europe, or maybe it sparks in the Middle East or North Africa. But this is, I don't see another 50-year drawn-out Cold War where we're talking about mutual assured destruction. We're talking about an arms race. I mean, we're setting the stage for an actual hot war on this planet that is going to take a lot of people by surprise that are not paying attention to what's going on around the planet.
Well, I think you're completely correct. And I think one of the major problems are, Charlie, is that they don't understand that the Cold War started somewhere in the beginning of 2009. We're in the sixth year of this Cold War, which has included now currency wars. You see, the biggest thing about the Cold War before is that you have to understand, once you now, and everybody wants to talk about taxes and how we attacked their market. We did, but we did not do it through a currency war. Once the currency war starts, people need to automatically understand that the Cold War is over. The currency war is the foundation leading up to the hot war. It is the transitional period that, if it is not solved rapidly, that a world dynamic could take place that shifts us into what one would call World War III, even though we're more like World War V, if you look at the actual definition of World War. So the realization is that this is what's taking place. You have now entered into a currency war. Now the minutes could be very precious to your preparation, to everything, because you have no idea how the country and nation is going to respond. Because if you move into a world war stage, well, the government is going to seize control of factory and production. The government is going to completely seize control of information, and so on and so forth. Well, the government is instantly going to perceive any of those people who do not agree, or who may become a threat in their own mind, like Japanese citizens. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, that was the last World War. So they will instantly look to who is a threat to the harmony and mechanics of their fascist state, and you will be re-educated. I mean, there's no other way for people to really, truly understand the breadth, the depth of what is taking place and what really could happen to you within this nation, and happen to you quite rapidly. Valley. You know, it has happened before, and all the groundwork is here: rendition, torture, secret camps, you know, fusion centers all over the place. All of these things are here to take place. And if you think they're going to let you and 7, 10, 100 of your rowdy little neighbors get in the way of them making bombs and guns at the local factory, well, you know, the dynamic is going to change.
Yeah. Well, and it's you know, like I said, it's I don't see, you know, even a decade of the continued, I don't want to call it saber rattling, but the buildup. I mean, there's definitely a buildup happening on both sides. And,
well, you see, that's what I'm saying, is that even though everybody wants to continue to look at it as saber rattling, it is actually saber battling. It is actually a fighting that is taking place that no one can see. That's what a currency war is. They're hitting you in the economic belt, and one country will push the other country until it has no choice. That's just how it boils down. It will break at some point. Someone will give, and something will happen. And at that point, since the world is so intertwined and so interdependent, which is what Russia and all of them are trying to get out of. I mean, it's just all bad. And like you said, if that situation takes place, each nation to then live into the future has to fall back on what it has to be able to make it into the future. Its own resources, its own know-how, its own ability, its own power. Well, like you said, we don't have anything. We don't have the number one education. We don't have production. We have nothing. We don't have the smartest kids on the block anymore. We're rated so far down the list, it is laughable to know what nations are in front of us. And we have no exports. We have a government. We have a fiat dollar, and we have guns and bullets. So what do you think we're going to export?
Guns and bullets. Death. Yeah. Drones and missiles. Until that runs its course, until the dollar is turned away by India and by Russia and by China and by Brazil and pardon me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, once again, you get to the situation for you to continue to export death, people must die. I mean, so the ultimate endeavor of thinking that this isn't going to turn out violently is silly. People have to die. When the only thing you have to export is death, somebody's got to die.
Well, and we're masters at doing that. It's obvious. Look at the last 13 years. Eric Lovely, you with me?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I said it's ridiculous, but I've definitely enjoyed this time.
Me too. And I'm a little bummed I'm looking at the clock now. We're going to hear the music any second now, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I probably will later on Doomcast, the torture report that came out. Just sickening. I mean, if you haven't read it, you can go to wideawakenews.com. It's the third or fourth story on the headlines. But the justification, the torture, what we're turning into as a people, as a country, what's being done in our name.
Did you see it? Some of the coverage now that there are specific nations that are coming out and saying, yes, not only was it rendition and torture, but we held the final stop prisons. And what does that mean? That's where they finally were done torturing the person and they killed them.
Yeah, the final. Yeah. It's disgusting. Read it. I'm sure we'll get into it, like I said, later tonight on Doomcast. Definitely more next week. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of the programs here on the one and only Rinse Radio Network. Once again, we'll be back next week, Tuesday, with Gary Hendershot, myself, next Wednesday, and Eric and I next Thursday. All right, have a good week. Have a good night. Peace.